Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's José Barzola. Welcome to our Advocacy for Social Justice Talk Story series, where we explore organized efforts and mechanisms for social change. Today's event is on peaceful leadership with Jenni Prisk. Today's session is about our world is facing considerable global discontent. Much of it is caused by lack of effective leadership and communication on platforms where leaders are driven by power instead of peace. We are all born with a brain and a heart. Let's maximize the potential of all people to utilize these parts of us that can lead to peace in our global communities through conflict resolution, understanding, and acceptance. Our guest today, Jenni Prisk, founded a nonprofit organization 3 weeks after September 11th, 2001, in the United States to promote peace and negotiation tables. She founded the Peace Committee at her Rotary Club in San Diego, California. She is a public speaking coach, motivational speaker, and communication specialist. Jenni is the author of the book Stand in Your Spotlight, an ode to living fully, which is focused on her ability to do good while being our best. She founded iVOW, which you can learn more at www.voicesofwomen.org, a podcast that highlights global women peacemakers. iVOW tells the stories of women in our global communities and paints fertile portraits of their experiences. These women are activists, peacemakers, politicians, and members of marginalized populations who are creating an accessible and important platform for their voices to educate and empower and enlighten all of us. And it is really an honor to have you here today. So thank you so much for joining us. And Jenni, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Well, mahalo, Jose, and thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with you. Jose and I have exchanged a number of emails, and I have witnessed and been participated in some of his excellent podcasts. So I feel very grateful, very flattered, and very honored to be sharing the screen with you today and sharing what I think is becoming a more and more vital topic, because our world is in somewhat of chaos at the moment. We've just lost President Jimmy Carter, very sadly, who was a very, very peaceful leader. We've just seen Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, step down. We have wars, and it starts with us. And so I'm delighted to be able to join you today, and all of you especially. I'm loving that in the chat box you are putting up where you are from. And I see that there is one member or one guest who's from New Zealand, and you've probably gathered that that's where I was born and raised, and I still have the accent, even after living in the United States, in San Diego, for the last 41 years. We went there because my husband was invited to join the space program, which is a rare gift for a New Zealander. And we said, let's go for a year and see how it goes. And 41 years later, we are citizens of America, but now delighted and very, very thrilled to be able to spend half the year in San Diego and the other half in New Zealand. Jose has very kindly given you my background, so I don't want to give you any more. I do want to just make a caveat that I realize that many of you who will be joining this call today have been practicing peace, if not all your lives, for much of your lives. That does not make me an expert. I do not like that word anyway, but it just allows me to create a conversation among all of us around the terms of peaceful leadership. So as you're joining and entering our conversation today, I'm going to ask Jose if he would start the PowerPoint. If he would do that, I'd be delighted, and we'll walk and talk this together. Although I think that Jose has recommended that we save the questions for the end of the presentation, because you will know that sometimes we can get off track and if we interrupt, and that means we miss out some of the content that I hope that you will enjoy and appreciate today. So let's get underway. It's all clear on slide 1 that my company is Prisk Communication. I'm almost 76 years of age and have been teaching communication, public speaking, leadership skills for about the last, my husband would say about 100 plus years. Not quite that long, but a very long time. And I'm just delighted to be with you all today. So if we might move to the next slide, where I can say mahalo to Jose for his support. He has been terrific to work with. Also to Dr. Maya Sotoro Ng for her inspiration. She is the reason I became connected to the University of Hawaii, and I am very, very grateful to her. And of course, to all of you for joining us today, because without you, I would look very silly talking to a blank screen. So next slide. You will see me quote the Dalai Lama on 2 or 3 occasions throughout this presentation because I just believe that he really understands what peace means and he tries to spread it so beautifully. I was fortunate enough to go to a presentation he gave in San Diego. And I have to say, my response to it was he looked like a very professional grown man playing in a sandbox. We were among an audience of thousands, and yet he spread his goodwill, his peace, his laughter, his fun, and his philosophy right throughout that entire right throughout that entire auditorium. It was amazing. And so as you breathe in, you cherish yourself. And as you breathe out, you cherish all beings. That's, I think, just an amazing thing for us all to learn. However, more importantly, let's get back to our agenda. And as a public speaking coach, I'm a great believer in the power of three. So we have three key points or message points we'll cover. Where does this kind of leadership begin? How can we promote it? And many of you, I know, are doing this throughout our global community already. And how will we benefit? And I know that some of you have recognized those points already. So those are the 3 areas that we're going to cover. If we could have the next slide. And I'm very grateful to Jose for forwarding this. Many of you will know this quote. And it's just always made me smile. We are riddled with mosquitoes in New Zealand at the moment. I live in the Bay of Islands, which is, of course, by the sound of it, surrounded by water. Mosquitoes love our place. And mosquitoes do mess up your sleep quite frequently. But I love the underlying power of this message that if you think you're too small to make a difference, then you're wrong, because each and every single one of us can make a difference towards peace on a daily basis. So, and another thing that you'll notice, especially when we go into the next slide, that when Jose changes it, as he's done right now, I don't speak for a few minutes or a few seconds, really, because when a slide is changed in any presentation, your instant reaction is to scan all the bullets. I could have had them flying in. I don't, because I think that gets distracting. So if you watch that I pause, it's just simply a trick I've always used, or a tip, for as long as I've been coaching and training in public speaking. Let your audience read a very full slide. So hopefully given you time to do that. And again, the quote from the Dalai Lama saying that we have to make peace with ourselves in order to make it with the rest of the world. And I think it's also incredibly important to realize our place in this world. Each one of us on this webinar is unique and different. No one in the world has ever come before you that is like you, and no one will ever follow you. Yes, you may have children, you may be supporting families, and there are strong likenesses, but no one has ever replicated your exact uniqueness. And so coming here with a purpose, when you hold a tiny baby in your arms and look in that child's face, you realize that child is here for a reason, just as you were when you were born. And so understanding that purpose helps us to realize our place in the world, which is an extremely important one. Never think that you are not important, because on a daily basis, to your organizations, your companies, your friends, your relatives, your community, you are extremely important. As you walk into a room, you let out a light and an aura that other people pick up on. And when you create that peacefulness, people appreciate that and they are drawn to you and they feel it. One of the hardest things I think for any of us to do is to walk in another's shoes. We've all experienced grief, we've all experienced pain, and sometimes we don't think about that if someone starts to annoy us, frustrate us, or our prejudices come out because we know that they might like sharing sob stories or they might like complaining, but we don't know what their background is always. I often use the analogy of the freeway in San Diego. If somebody annoys me with their driving, my first reaction always is, oh, what do you think you're doing? And I can feel the anger building. And then I think something is making you drive at that speed. Something is making you cut in and out of traffic. Now, it could be alcohol, it could be drugs. I'm not so sympathetic there. But if it is somebody who's pushing me, it may mean that something is pushing them. And so actually being able to slide our feet into someone else's shoes is a challenging task, but one that can really make it different for how we react to those people. And in conjunction with that, practicing tolerance and understanding. We've all got people in our lives who have driven us nuts or are driving us crazy right now. We wouldn't be human if we didn't have those impacts. However, if we can learn to see that person or their situation or their challenge or their problem through their eyes, we will see things very, very differently. I have a friend who recently in San Diego, her father passed away yesterday. She and I are on opposite ends of the political spectrum. When we get together, we make it a pact not to talk about politics because it's much safer. However, she is grieving now and has expressed her grief for her father. I have written to her because the love of her father and her life at the moment is far more important than our political differences. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I may be 76. I still have dozens of years to go before I manifest this properly. But these are the things that we can try each day. And listening is so incredibly important. So many of us feel that listening is really just waiting to speak. And that's often how it's created. That when someone is speaking, we get busy to tell them, oh, I've had that experience, or I know how you feel. We don't actually know how they feel. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody else. I will jump in and think that I can finish your sentence. Oh, I know what you're going to say. I don't know. And I certainly don't know it any better than you do. So listening is probably paramount to not only learning about others, but learning about ourselves at the same time, because the longer we listen, the more we learn. Then we step into, but I don't agree with you. And we are perfectly entitled to say that. However, if we can say it in a way that allows the person we're speaking with or the people we're speaking with to maintain their integrity and their dignity, the way you are working on maintaining yours, then peace starts to exist in that setting. Whenever anybody comes to me in a very wound up state, or they raise something that is complaining or maybe even discriminatory, the first place I go is to ask them questions. And they always begin with what or how. I don't go into the why because that's probing. What caused you to feel that way? How could we work together on this to mitigate this situation? I remember once when I was chairing the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls in San Diego, I chaired that for 3 years. A woman had been very keen to join the commission. She had a very, very sharp edge to her, although she had done a lot of good in the community. And my commissioners all came to me and said, if you bring her onto the commission, I'm leaving. Now, this is a conversation from very, very valuable colleagues and cohorts of mine sitting around me that I did not want to lose. So I had the unenviable task of having to let her know that there wasn't a position for her. She came to the next few meetings because they were public, and she let fly at me and told me what an unpleasant, unforgiving, oh, I won't go into the names, but they weren't very nice in a public setting. And what I was able to do from my position in the chair role was to ask her, what caused you to feel this way? How can we ameliorate it and make you feel that you are a part of the commission, but not necessarily serving on the board? And by mitigating that, we eventually broke it down and she stopped coming to meetings. I wrote to her with our reasoning. I did not tell her that the other commissioners had said no to her, because then I was going to start another battle that they did not need to fight. Interestingly, about a month after this all settled, her house caught fire, and she and her husband suffered very, very severe burning, much as the folks in Los Angeles are suffering from at the moment. And my heart goes out heavily to all of them. So I hope none of you are in LA, or if you are, that all is safe. So they created a GoFundMe for the house burning down, and I sent money in. Now, again, that doesn't make me anybody special. It just means that to me, that was a way to make peace. And when I saw her next at an event, she came and spoke to me. So we can work these things from with our own spirit and our own soul. And we can leave situations with a greater awareness, not only of ourselves, but the others. And then the biggest thing is forgiveness. Forgiveness is possibly, maybe not for you, but for me, has been one of the hardest things for me to learn and to overcome. My father abused me. I'm not going into details. Life is beautiful. I'm very blessed, very supported, very happy, but he was an abuser. I found that life only moved on for me when I was able to forgive him. And having done that meant that I sent him to a place where he can now rest, but my brain can also rest. So anytime we can forgive someone, even for the smallest element, and everything starts small, that can make a difference, not only in our lives, but in their lives, because we create a ripple effect. So maybe you have some questions on that, but I'm going to move on from this slide, if we may now. Jose, thank you. And again, my brain hasn't gone blank. You know why I'm pausing. And I find that when I'm starting to get agitated, the biggest thing I can do is take an enormous inhale with my lips closed. Now, what we tend to do when we get anxious is go and do it all through our noses. That breath only goes, or you probably can't, yes, you can just see me now, I think. That breath only goes to about the top of our chest. When we close our lips and breathe deeply into our bodies through our noses, we take that breath to the base of the diaphragm. And that's where our solar plexus is, where we feel everything. That's why in early days in ancient Rome, the gladiators wore those breastplates, because if they're struck there, that's where the heart is, it's where the lungs sit at the bottom. It's a very, very important part of our body. And when we fill it with deep breath and then exhale any anger that we have, we can then approach a situation in a totally different way. Many of us do this when we're writing messages. It's like we walk away from the message and come back to correct it or change it because suddenly it didn't seem as good as when we first wrote it. Breathing in like this gives us that opportunity for the body to relax. When your lips are closed, you can't say anything. And then when you exhale any anger, it can make a tremendous difference. Speaking to a person's heart and their eyes. So our eyes are our windows of our souls. And our heart is at the center of everything we do. If it wasn't beating steadily and well, we couldn't function. We know that. And so what I try to do when I'm speaking with someone and there may be some conflict arising, I go from the person themselves inside to their heart. And I really try and see that beating. And when I see that beating and keep my focus on their eyes, the whole persona changes, and so does the situation. Now, obviously, I'm not a doctor. I don't want you suddenly to start saying to anybody, if you're thinking about their heart, oh, how are you feeling today? Things don't look so good. We're not doing it for that reason, and you understand that, I know. But it's the fact of, if you think more about what drives their mind and body, rather than just the person in front of you, you'll go deeper. And it's also good. I swim every second day. And as I do my laps, I talk to my internal organs. Okay, so I'm a bit freaked out, but I want to live for at least another 20 years if I can. And I know taking care of them is a good idea. So, and then slowing down and listening. Many of us speak at an almighty rate, and this can sometimes and more frequently be the case for females. I've had to diagnose this and dissect this over the years because of public speaking. But the slower we speak, the more careful the choice of our words, and audiences are approximately 10 to 15 words behind you. So when you speak slowly, they understand in the same time frame as you're speaking, and they get the opportunity to ride with you. And that creates calm in both of you. And calm, of course, ultimately leads to peace. And then we must respect the person and their words. Not everybody speaks the way we would like to hear. People have different dialects. They have different forms of delivery. They will sometimes use incorrect grammar. I'm guilty of that as well. But they're doing their best in this world. And when we remember the best, we treat the person with the best as well. Then when you've had an exchange, before you get busy with something else, and nowadays, of course, the first thing we do is pick up our phones, before we go to our phones or our computers or anything else that is needing our time, stop and reflect on the exchange. What did you learn from it? How did you grow? How do you think the other person may have grown? How will the next exchange you have be? And it's astonishing how you can build friendships from situations or build better relationships from situations that have been challenging. And then you look inside yourself and say, where did I grow from that? My husband and I had a fairly heady discussion this morning about something that concerns us both. And he came and explained to me why he was upset. And it was due to my not listening well enough and not hearing him for what he was saying. So I said to him, I'm working really hard on seeing it from your point of view and through your eyes. And he immediately changed his whole body language and his whole disposition. And it was really good to see that happen. And I have as well. And the other thing is smiling. Now, we often think we're smiling and we're not. And we can feel the change in our faces when we're smiling. But a smile can absolutely change an entire day, not only for you, because it's been studied and researched that it's proven that when we smile, we actually make ourselves fitter and better and more well, healthier. Jose has one of the best smiles I've ever seen, and he uses it a lot. He's very, very good with sharing his smile. The other fun thing I've found over the years too is that if you walk through your company, your organization, or just share it with a friend, everybody wonders what you've been up to if you're smiling and they don't know why. So this is all about practicing mindfulness, being very aware of ourselves, that important part we play in the world, and then exhibiting it and sharing it with others. So I hope that's given you some food for thought before we move on. Thanks, Jose. This story breaks my heart, and it's the reason now we've looked at ourselves, now we're looking at why we need it. The local tensions, the breakdown in the rule of law, the illicit economic gain. I don't need to read all of this to you. You are reading it as I am speaking slowly here. Our world has changed dramatically. We've always had wars. And peace is not a lack of war. They will always exist. I think we cannot prevent them completely. However, what we can do is endeavor to mitigate them in our arenas, because again, it's that ripple effect that spreads and changes the world. So let's look at the next slide and what we can think about doing. Thanks, Jose. Now, I've got a very lengthy looking reference here, but let me just go through the slide and I'll come back. Reading, researching, and reacting is very, very important. Reading to ensure that we have the facts right. Researching if we're unsure from very, very telling or very confirmed sites that are known for their ability to speak the truth is extremely important. And then reacting, and I've got some areas where we can react in my feelings or in my thinking is extremely important. So there you'll see I've referenced the elders, and President Jimmy Carter was a member of the elders. And we have leaders from around the world. And if you're interested, take a look at their website, because they are constantly either speaking about or gathering assemblies on peace. Now, I know this is exactly what you're doing at the University of Hawaii. You are creating peace within your conflict and specialist areas. That's how I came to meet Jose, because I was interested in the workings that you are creating. So looking at the elders is one. Another one is the Institute for Economics and Peace, or the Global Index. You're probably already aware, but I'm putting these up on the screen in case you want to take note of these addresses and maybe look them up. And of course, one solid address always leads to a lot of others. We have the ability to use the pen, or which is now the keyboard, but the pen is mightier than the sword. Some of you who are older on our call may remember that or know that. But writing is extremely important. I wrote an editorial for the paper in San Diego when the United States went into Iraq. I've written other editorials and essays. I've maybe just shared them on LinkedIn, or I've shared them on Facebook, which I do quite a lot. And it's important that we air our thinking, but it's also important that we air with a thought to the people who will be reading it. Our ideas and notions and concepts are ours, and we're perfectly entitled to them, but not everyone shares them. So if we can walk a middle line on those essays or those editorials, it leaves us looking knowledgeable, but it doesn't leave us looking as though we hate. So just a little thought there. Be very conscious of AI and check all of your facts. Now, we've seen Mark Zuckerberg this week say that Meta is going to stop checking, and I'm seeing Jose nodding to this. There'll be a number of us annoyed about that, because I think that this is going to create some chaos. And we've got to be very careful. Some of you may, I use Facebook because it keeps me in touch with my friends in America while I'm in New Zealand, and vice versa. I learn about babies being born, marriages taking place, promotions, all sorts of things. But you will have probably, if you use Facebook, have seen the slide that's been created with the wording all over Mark Zuckerberg's image about the fact that he's a pedophile and he's died. Well, that's people going back and laughing at him because of this decision to not be checking Meta and other facts more carefully. Now, we have an election coming. No, I'm sorry, we've had an election. We have an inauguration coming up in the United States on January the 20th. We will have a new president in the White House. And I'm just going to be very, tactical or tactful here, and say that I think there is going to be quite a lot of chaos that will ensue. And it's going to be up to us to check facts so that we can maintain that peaceful base. Now, President Obama, who was my favorite president, I have no shame in saying that. I thought he was absolutely incredible. And he has, of course, his organization, and he's just been dealing with pluralism and talking about it with young people in the Asia Pacific region. If we can accept pluralism, and in its simplest form, it is peaceful coexistence despite our differences. If we practice it and look at everybody else as a human being, not as a member of the LGBTQ community, not of a different religion, but if we see them as human beings with beating hearts and strong minds, then we start to see the human race as a different place and a different population. Speak up, protest, and write to people in power. I'm a member of the AAUW, the university, that's the American Association of University Women. They often send things to the US government about equal rights, women's rights, etc. I always write wherever they, if I agree with them, wherever they send me the opportunity to do so. I just protested in New Zealand, a country that most people think of as a place that's very, very peaceful. But in 1840, we had a Treaty of Waitangi, that was founded or started by the Maori chiefs, our indigenous race, with the British people who came to colonize New Zealand. Now we have a member in Parliament who is trying to refute some of that bill. So I walked in the hikoi because I wanted to support Māori, and I also have just written my submission to the Ministry of Justice. Again, when I share these epithets with you, please don't think that I think I'm anybody special about this, but I do know that personal stories are what engage and correct. So do not be frightened to start things with your own writing and your own sensibilities, and then maybe create a discussion group in your neighborhood. During COVID, which was a very severe time for all of us, we happened to stay on in New Zealand for 2.5 years. We started to get very concerned about how the government was reacting, and a lot of people looked at New Zealand and our then Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and loved what she had done. However, we knew that if we went back to the States, we wouldn't be able to get into New Zealand for a long time, so we stayed here. I organised, and this is going to sound terrible, driveway drinks with our neighbourhood, where we would all come down to the end of our driveway with a glass of wine at about 5:30. We sat hugely spread out from each other, but we were able to discuss the politics of the day and see how each of us was feeling, how each of us was faring, and it was great fun. So as well, but we went deep and we got to know our neighbours even better than we know them when we see them eye to eye. But discussion groups can be incredibly powerful, and you have the power to create one. Thank you. Moving on. Need to keep an eye on time until I'm doing that. I saw this image of this horse, and I love horses, but that absolutely terrified me. And I know it's not a new photograph, but I just put that up there because it's this military technology and this geopolitical competition that is driving us forward in trying to be the better country, the better technologically equipped, the better war equipped, etc. And these rankings here were interesting. From 163 countries in our world, 92 of them are engaged in conflicts outside their borders. That was an horrific statistic for me. And you may already know this, but looking these things up, that made me feel very, very sad about what we know. Iceland comes across as the most peaceful. And of course, being a women's advocate, also, I love what they do for women. They have a number of women, as does Rwanda, in their governments, which I'm thrilled about. Yemen is the least peaceful. And Europe, up until Ukraine and some of the situations that are arising there, was the most peaceful region. And it's interesting to me because most people would have said it was New Zealand or Australia, because we live in the South Pacific region. However, we just need to in order to promote peace, we need to be aware of how it is translating in our world community and where some of these facts and figures are. So that's why I threw that slide into the mix. And when we look at the next one, we've got some more things that we can do. Thank you. And I'm going to start with the box on the right because it's just where we came from. We can at least change our communities. Each of us has portions of need in whatever community we live in, whether it be poverty, whether it be lack of education, whether it be economic stress, which of course is tied up with poverty, or there's unfairness of the way that people are being treated. So again, going back to starting with ourselves. When we can be peaceful, we emanate a peaceful aura to everyone else. And of course, the vital importance of teaching our children. We went out to dinner with friends recently in an outdoor restaurant here in Kirikiri in the Bay of Islands. And I see that there are 1 or 2 people who've signed up joining today from New Zealand. So I'm thrilled about that. But we were eating outside, and next to us at a table, there was a family of 4, 2 boys and mum and dad. And the 2 boys, while mum and dad were speaking, were buried in books, not their phones. And I just had to speak to the family before they left. And I said to them, that was so joyous to watch your children reading? They said, oh, they're crazy about reading. Well, by reading, they're reading that proofed and edited spoken word, if it's nonfiction, of course, or written word, but they are learning to think for themselves. And when we can teach peace to children when they're young, even if it's just simply about not squashing a bug on the sidewalk, that is teaching peace as well. So teaching our children is extremely important. I wish we had more peaceful studies in the curricula in our universities, our junior schools, our primary schools. I'm using English and American phrases here because putting it into the curricula is so, so important, as is our ability to honor others. Promotions are an important thing to us in our world, or getting better jobs. And often on the way to getting those better jobs, we don't acknowledge the shoulders that we stood on. And honoring others and bringing them forward and into the spotlight, which I'm a theatre buff, I have been since I was 16, and so therefore a theatrical title to my book, Stand in Your Spotlight. We are good to stand in our spotlight, and we should especially take any kudos for good works that we have done. But it's incredibly wonderful to put other people in the spotlight and to credit them. And sometimes that's a very hard thing to do because we feel, well, if I honor them, do I slip backwards? No, you don't. We never do. Because when we honor others, they usually in turn remember you, and the two of you rise together. Spreading peace in our neighborhoods. We started it just with the conversations at the end of our gateway. Now we join in with the community on several occasions throughout the year to exchange conversations, to grow to know each other more, to create safety and protection in our communities, but also underlying that is creating peace. I've said a lot about listening. I'm not going to go on about that again, but when we listen and learn, the world becomes our oysters. Voting appropriately. Who is the more peaceful of any of your candidates in any election that's running? Who is the one that will bring greater peace to our countries or to our neighborhoods? Be very wary of the war games, especially some of the things that children have on the internet now. Just make sure that what they're watching isn't building up in them or in any of us. A lot of adults play war games as well, or play games on computers. Is that building any kind of anger or dissatisfaction or a complaining factor in us from doing that? And then, of course, the biggest thing is visualizing a peaceful world. I love to paint in my spare time, and I've just finished, I'm just on finishing a painting that has the world in it. And painting that globe was absolutely amazing. And as I did paint, I kept thinking, wouldn't it be incredible if we all lived with the view that our astronauts live with when they circle the globe 16 times a day, and all they see is peace. All they see are borders working together or adjoining each other. They see the storms. They will be seeing the fires in Los Angeles at the moment. They cannot see any warfare. And when they return to Earth, they have envisaged this peaceful world, and we can do it too. Thank you, Jose. For the next one. So we are getting very near to the end of my presentation, so I'm hoping that's going to leave us. I'm aiming for a good 15 minutes for questions if you have them. So economic stability is one of the greatest ways that we can attain, retain, and maintain peace. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy, which I won't go into because I get the feeling that all of you on this call will definitely be very aware of Maslow, but the very baseline of that is having our physiological and psychological needs met, that we have a roof over our head, that we have food in our bellies, that we have a place to sleep safely at night. If we could grant that to every country in the world, it would change our whole approach to living entirely. So economic stability is extremely important, as is education. For every child to be able to go to school and to be able to go through those school days without a fear of anything on the way to school or on the way home from school, to gain an amazing education that will carry them through the rest of their lives, to my mind, should also be a given. And I actually put in there healthcare. I know it does. I wanted everything to begin with E, and once it started, I kept a roll. But healthcare is also, of course, extremely important. And when we are educated, we know how to take care of our bodies and our minds and to look after them. I was blessed to go down to a school, an all-girls school in Kenya, several years ago now, and teach a small course there, but to actually live on the campus. And to see the hunger with which those girls devoured that education was incredible. Even if you simply go to a school and volunteer and read stories to them, it can change their lives. So education. And then, of course, we have lined up equality and equity. And I looked this up again this morning for the version of that, because I think quite often we put equality and equity in the same sentence. But here's what I got. Equality means that each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. That's equality. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach equality. So we have to give extra to our disabled friends and family around us because they're not able to perhaps walk around on two legs as we are. So we give them that so that they can reach equality through equity. And when we can think about that and uplifting others, it can make a tremendous difference in their lives. Equanimity is just about balance. It's just about seeing the glass half full as opposed to empty. It's about smiling when things go bad if you can. Now, I know there are some issues in our lives that we just cannot smile at. But if the day is pretty good, then smile, because you'll pass it on to someone else and possibly lift their days also. And empirical living becomes important as well. Now, again, because empirical living sometimes makes us feel a little unsure of what it means, it's evidence and information grounded in observation. Now, this is how often that scientists work. They set up an experiment, they follow it, they watch the outcome. And it may not have been anything that's ever happened before, but they believe the outcome because they have observed it and they have watched it from the beginning to end. So our empirical living means that if we see injustice being done, then we can handle it on the spot. If we see somebody being treated very unfairly or not being given a promotion, we can speak up. We can become sponsors. And that simply comes from a place within us that we are living harmoniously ourselves within our leadership for our neighborhoods and our communities that ultimately spreads. And then, of course, taking care of our environment is extremely peace building, because the more we save this beautiful blue globe that we live on, the longer we will live, the better our lives for our children, and the more peaceful things can become. So it starts with our environment. But then, of course, in this case, because this is my penultimate slide, it exists because of our existence. It's because of how we live and what we bring into the lives that we live. And the leadership, we are all leaders. A lot of people say, oh, no, you're a leader because you're the CEO, or you're a leader because you're the head of this organization. That's not the case. Each of us is a leader, and each of us has the ability to lead peacefully in everything that we do. And with that, and the last slide, I want to say mahalo and thank you. And now open it for any questions, Jose.
Thank you so much. That was, thank you. Thank you for guiding us along on peace leadership and just all the different steps and how you go about it. I was taking some notes as we were going by, and as you talked about, people wanting to be like, yes, I can connect with that as well. I Some things that kind of come to mind that in conversations that I've had lately is about how you talked about peace into curriculum and taking it beyond just peace being a field. I think we tend to restrict it by saying that it's a field of study because when on the other side it's like it's all within all of us and it's within all our different areas of it's actually embedded within all the different fields of studies actually. And so just
Right.
going into like the shift in your perspective to appreciate that and acknowledge how we do that. I love your example about reading books to our youth and how impactful that may be. Because once more, representation and role modeling, you don't know who's observing. You, that's one thing I've learned over time as I move along in my own life and move into different stages of you don't know who you might make an impact on down the road. 'Cause as I reflect upon like who made an impact on myself when I was, young, what are the memories that I carry on? What were those like the kindness acts that were done that I still carry on today? So no, thank you. Thank you. Just brought a lot of beautiful memories to mind. So thank you for guiding us on peace leadership. Just a couple of questions. What was the catalyst for you to focus on peace? Like, what guided you in
Mm.
this pathway?
Yes, it's a big question, isn't it? Somehow.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's a good one. Thank you. Two things. One, the country I was born and raised in, New Zealand, and because all those years ago when I was born, it was an incredibly peaceful arena. We didn't, or if we were engaged in war, I wasn't very aware of it. I was just happily playing on the grass at home or playing with the kids in the street. And so everything felt very, very peaceful. So I think it was imbued in my DNA. The second thing was the not altercations. I'm trying to think of the best word. My situation with my father, and I've written this all up in my book, so I'm not ashamed of. I'm not going to go into details, but because he destroyed the peace in my mind, because it shattered my sense of self-esteem, it shattered my sense of belonging, because it made me feel as though I was different from everybody else because nobody else at school talked about it. Then he started to make me stand out in a way that I didn't appreciate and that wasn't good for me. And so I was incredibly sort of underrated. I underrated myself. And I think the catalyst happened in America, and it really was through the Institute for Peace and Justice at the Joan B. Kroc School, which is based at the University of San Diego. That's a mouthful, like that slide I had with all the websites. And I met the women who came from around the world, four of them at a time, to live in San Diego in a beautiful environment on the university campus and spreading how they handled peace in their countries. And they were from Africa, they were from Pakistan, they were from Israel, they were from Palestine, they were from all over the world. They were from Australia. We had a Native American from obviously from the US. And I had the great fortune, because I was volunteering there, to meet with them all. And that started to become the catalyst a good 15 years ago, I would think. And so I've tried to practice it ever since. That was a long answer.
No, no, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll share a little bit about for myself. Just I think one of the things I always share with folks is that as I reflect upon my own life, it's something that I've always practiced. I just wasn't using that terminology. I just share that for folks out in the audience who may not think, oh, they're doing peace. They're not in the peace field, or they're not doing peace work, or they're not involved actively in peace building or peacemaking, peacekeeping, to just reflect upon their own journey and what's guided them. So we have is it a question that, let's see, I'm going to just read what our audience wrote. Today's world, unfortunately, leadership seems synonymous with bold and aggressive characteristics, leading to popularity for those who speak the loudest, and in the worst cases, promoting chaos instead of peace. However, there are also, and many, I think, who are quietly leading, whose voices, unfortunately, are not heard as loudly as the bolder ones. What do you think can we do to also recognize and amplify contributions of these quieter leaders, fostering an environment where diverse leadership styles can thrive?
That is that is a very, very powerful question, which I thoroughly appreciate. I actually know who sent it. So I appreciate that. I won't use names on here because I know we try to always, if we can, maintain anonymity. It's a great question. Why is it that the loudest voices are heard? It's a big one to break down and a vital question. However, again, it starts with the self. And I really appreciate, Jose, you bringing in that fact about if you're not studying peaceful studies, if you're not in a peace institute, how can you create peace? It's the ability of each and every one of us because it's in us. So I so agree with you. My response to the question is that in order for our voices to match or to supersede, we have to make more stances than the loud people do, for a start. We have to write more, say more, get involved in more, apply more. We also have to focus on those voices that require uplifting. Often people are working behind the scenes because they are very shy, they're very uncomfortable being out in front, leading for peace. But this is something that once you have started to speak, if you are prepared to go the whole distance, that will start to happen. It's when people recognize you through your writing and your speaking that that element grows. And I'm also very happy to have a further conversation with this questioner when I can. But it's a very, very powerful question. How did they get to the front? Now, it's interesting. If you compare Carter and the man who's going into the White House in a few days, they are completely different. And the world in a lot of the United States did not like Jimmy Carter. They didn't feel, especially around Panama and a number of other issues, they didn't feel, and Iran, they didn't feel that he was a good leader. Now his piece is being touted as a piece of history. We now have someone a lot louder going into the White House. And yes, his policies are being heard, but are they all going to be adopted? And my wish is, I hope not. How, because some of them are very strange. I mean, annexing Canada and taking over ownership of the Canada, etc., and the Gulf of Mexico, and I do becoming the Gulf of America. And I do love the Mexican president's retort, who said that the whole country should be Mexican America. And I thought that was very good. And I think there's an example. She is not a hugely outspoken person. She's new to her role. However, what she's done is already spoken out. She's done it in two ways: short and sweet and humorous. And that's often how we make our stand. But it will start with you if you wish to promote it. And it will only keep expanding when you carry people with you and you become not louder than the loud, but more important than the loud, so that the loud voices, especially if they're preaching ill, get more silenced. I hope that helps. That was a long answer again. You're muted.
I think it's one thing I do want to do is get great credit to women leaders who have done some speaking of, you brought up the president of Mexico. There was also some commentary from the incoming or the new prime minister for for Canada, I believe. So there's yeah, I think in humor is one of those things that we kind of tend to look toward to kind of guide us in these challenging times, because otherwise it's like, how do you stomach this? How do you move forward? But let's see. Somebody else had a comment. Indeed, there are other ways to make a contribution. I like the phrase "not louder than the loud, but more important." Look forward to talking more. I will say,
Okay, that's a great
yeah,
question.
yeah. I will
Thank
say
you.
there is great. You brought up a good, Jimmy Carter and how he might have been he rocked the boat a little back in the day, and how things time. So maybe as an eternal optimist, maybe we're just rocking the boat again, and hopefully some good will come out of these, what we're seeing as anxiety and challenging times
Yeah,
up
yeah.
ahead. So,
And when
and I think it kind of goes back to, sorry, I just want to, one thing that I always think about is, we talk about, not getting too comfortable and making sure we always lean into our discomfort. And it's not just a matter of promoting peace, but, and we talk about inclusivity, we have to keep checking in, like, are we truly being inclusive of everyone? Or are we just comfortable with the way things are? But yeah, sorry.
No, that's wonderful. Sorry, I looked aside because I saw another a another I thought it was a
Yeah.
question. It's a
Yeah,
statement though that you'll see there.
yeah, we could
I'd be happy to bring it to the
talk to
island.
our healthcare workers on the island. Yes,
I'd be
yes,
more than happy to do that. Hawaii is one of my favorite places in the world. Love it. Anyway,
yes,
that's something for Jose and I to discuss, I think.
yes,
When we live by our values, and if we have confirmed that our values are forward thinking, progressive, and peaceful, then it's easier to live by those values and simply be promoting peace on a daily basis. I've just International Women's Day is coming up. I'm pleased that you mentioned women, Jose, because I'm a women's activist and have been fighting for women's rights for a long, long time. And again, I think that stems from my childhood and the fact that mine were subdued and they were put in a very bad place. That if I can rise, then so can everybody else and higher. So now, of course, I've said all that and I've forgotten where I was going. Oh, International Women's Day is coming up on March 8th, as I'm sure we're all aware. And I'm working on staging a women's conference here in the little town of Kirikiri in the Bay of Islands, and it's going to be about women in leadership, but I want there to be a peaceful leadership portion in there, or at least for someone to address it and how they've handled conflict and that sort of thing over the years. So more in this space, but coming up.
yes. Thank you. And yeah, please let us know. Happy to share with folks who may be interested in joining. Um, but well, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, your guidance, your mentorship. Um, just wondering if one last question is we have a couple minutes still. Like, do you have any guidance on how to practice inclusivity during these challenging times?
Yes, that's an interesting one because they're getting tougher and tougher. And especially since we're going to have this office of, I'm talking strictly America here, and you can reflect on anything I say within your own countries or your own philosophies or knowledge, is that, we've got this Department of Effectiveness that's going to be installed in the new American administration. And that concerns me a little bit because I'm seeing already that DEI is starting to go on a slide, and that bothers me. We can practice inclusivity every day of our lives, right? Now, here's a tiny little example. I have only just had to give in and get a gardener. I love gardening, but I'm not as fit as I was when I was 29. So I've hired a gardener, an absolutely incredible woman who is making a big difference to my garden. She's come around this morning and it's raining. Oh, but she said the weeds will be easier to pull. I said, "Where's your raincoat?" She said, "I didn't bring one." So I gave her mine. Now, I didn't give it to her. I mean, I've loaned it to her. That is, you may think, well, that's pretty pathetic if you're even quoting it. But that's how small they start. It's helping somebody across the road. It's attending an organization that you wouldn't even think of joining, but you go because you want to learn about how those people might be struggling with daily life. You do something at the supermarket for somebody who's looking a little down and out, and who we may walk away from because they're not a person like us. Instead, we stop. We slap $10 on the counter and say, "Let that go toward the groceries." It's inclusivity simply has us seeing the entire race as our brothers and sisters, no matter what their sexual orientation, their religion, their economic situation. And I think that's very Buddhist, and I've always said that that would be that is I don't want to get religious here. How can I do this carefully? Anyway, it's how we think and it's how we decide to live that allows us to practice inclusivity. If you're at a networking function, over to the person who looks least like the group that you belong to and engage them in conversation. That's inclusivity. I've done that on many occasions because I have a networking workshop and I do that myself. And I end up having the most amazing conversations with people that I wouldn't necessarily have perhaps chosen, wouldn't have invited them maybe to a dinner in my home at that stage. After the conversation, changes my view and changes how I see others. So it's seeing others just like ourselves that starts to practice inclusivity. We are all one. And maybe that's a note to finish on.
No, thank you. Thank you. Basically, an opportunity to continue learning. That's what I look at, an opportunity to continue to not only lean into our discomfort, but also grow and continue learning. I think it's eternal, lifelong learners. And it's tough.
Starting,
It's tough if you're like not, a readily like an extrovert per se, and you know, but yeah, no, I thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this wisdom. I greatly appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing how, you know, we move forward together, collaborating and in this larger world, because it is, you know, it has to start somewhere, and
certainly
going
does.
back to the power of community, in times of concern over leadership and where a nation or various nations may be going, I have to look back at history and see the power of community. And when community truly comes together and organizes, true change can truly happen. So thank you.
It
Thank you for
certainly
inspiring
can.
us today.
Well, and one other quick final thought, very quick. Start by speaking to yourself in the mirror. I had to do that to grow my self-esteem. So I talked to myself because you're your very best friend and simply look at yourself and say, I am a peacemaker. What can I do today? And it's really interesting how that just seeps into the brain. Once we practice with the muscle, it all remains. So just another small thing to think of. And again, my deep appreciation to you, Jose, and to everybody who has attended. Mahalo, and thank you. I hope we continue staying in touch.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, take care.
Take care. Bye bye.